The lost train, trapped between time. It was a dark, cool Friday evening, and I found myself standing on the platform of a small, almost deserted railway station. The old departure board clicked softly as it announced the final trains of the night. My destination was a quaint village in the countryside, where I intended to spend the weekend. The platform was strangely empty, save for a handful of distant travelers. The wind whistled through the tracks, and the faint creak of the station clock was the only sound. Suddenly, I spotted the lights of an approaching train in the distance. A shiver ran down my spine, and I felt the uncanny sensation of being watched. The train didn't look modern. It seemed old, far older than any train it ever encountered. Its paint was faded, and its windows bore a fine layer of dust. It appeared incongruous with the present, as if it were a relic from another time. With a loud hiss, the doors opened. Without much thought, I stepped inside, immediately sensing a stifling atmosphere. The interior was antiquated. Heavy seats upholstered in patterned fabric, brass fittings around the windows, and dim, flickering lamps. There was a faint scent of aged wood, mixed with a trace of smoke, though smoking hadn't been allowed on trains for decades. Suddenly, the speakers crackled, and a monotone voice announced, "Next stop, the past." I flinched. Had I misheard? I sank into an empty seat, glancing around. The other passengers sat silently. A man in an old felt hat held a book on his lap, yet his eyes seemed vacant. An elderly woman was threading beads through her fingers, as if in prayer. No one spoke. No one moved more than necessary. When I looked out of the window, my heart nearly stopped. It was as though it stepped into a film. Instead of the nightscape it expected, I saw a family on a meadow. Children were laughing and chasing one another, while a woman sat on a picnic blanket, waving. A man approached, lifting a small child high into the air. For a moment, they seemed utterly happy, but the scene shifted abruptly. The same man was now standing alone at a graveside. Rain was falling, and he clutched a photograph in his hand. I could feel the sorrow etched into his face, as if it were my own. The speakers crackled once more. "Please remain seated. The past catches up with us all." The train came to a jarring halt at an abandoned station. Through the window, I saw a family bidding farewell. A man embraced a woman who was visibly struggling to hold back her tears. Beside them stood a little girl clutching a stuffed toy tightly to her chest. I felt a pang in my chest. Something about the scene felt eerily familiar. Suddenly, the girl turned her gaze directly towards me, as though she could see me through the window. Her stare was piercing, almost pleading. Then the train doors closed, and we moved on. The train came to a halt again, this time gentler, almost soundless. When I looked out of the window, I saw a brightly lit station, but something about it was deeply unsettling. It was as if the scene had been crafted for children. Colorful play equipment lined the platform, and faded posters of circus performances adorned the walls. Suddenly, the sound of children's laughter filled the carriage. The doors opened, and 3 children stepped aboard. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothes, reminiscent of a bygone era. One of them, a girl with pigtails, smiled at me before hurrying into the next carriage with the others. I wanted to follow them, but at that moment, my eyes fell on a wooden doll the girl had left behind. As I bent down to pick it up, I heard a faint, almost whispering voice right behind me. "Don't touch it. It's ours." My heart skipped a beat. I turned, but no one was there. The doll was still on the floor. Or had it moved closer? I didn't dare touch it. Under my seat, I found a newspaper. The headline read, "Ghost Train Vanishes Without a Trace." The article described how a train had disappeared while passing through a tunnel. Witnesses claimed to have seen it reappear in various places before vanishing again. I glanced at the date on the paper. It was the very day of my journey. My hands trembled as I slid the newspaper back under the seat. The next stop brought the train to a station shrouded entirely in mist. The platform was barely visible, and an oppressive silence hung in the air. A man boarded. He wore a long coat and a hat that obscured his face. He sat directly across from me. Though I couldn't see his eyes, I could feel his gaze boring into me. After a few minutes, the man reached into his coat and placed an old, yellowed letter on the table between us. I opened my mouth to ask what it meant, but before I could utter a word, he was gone, vanished, as if into thin air. Hesitantly, I opened the letter. It contained only 5 words. "Don't get off. You're ours." I couldn't simply accept this. I ran through the train, passing silent passengers who barely seemed to notice me. At last, I reached the driver's cab. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door, and the sight stole it right back. The room was pitch black, empty, and oppressively silent. There were no controls, no lights, only the door behind me. It felt as though the space had drained every ounce of energy from my body. Shaken, I hastily shut the door and retreated down the carriage. The train screeched to a halt, the sound sharp and unsettling. The station was like a relic from another time. The walls were overgrown with vines, the tracks corroded with rust. Abandoned suitcases littered the platform, as though their owners had fled in panic, leaving everything behind. An old man boarded. He was unnervingly calm, a stark contrast to the eerie surroundings. He sat beside me and began speaking, as if he'd been waiting a long time. "They're looking for someone like you," he said softly. "Someone who never leaves the train." I wanted to ask what he meant, but he simply turned away. When I blinked, he was gone. In his place was an old timetable. Its destinations bore unsettling names like oblivion and eternity. My stomach knotted. The train suddenly accelerated, and I gripped the nearest seat for balance. It felt as though we were hurtling forward at jet speed. Yet strangely, I wasn't thrown about. The windows turned black, and faint whispers seemed to emanate from the very walls of the train. We stopped again. Some passengers disembarked, their faces pale and ghost-like, while others, more vibrant, more alive, boarded. I tried speaking to one of the newcomers, but he didn't respond, as though I wasn't even there. When the train stopped again, I was no longer in my time. Outside the windows was the past, a world frozen in the 1980s. The train had come to a standstill, yet the doors refused to open. I tried everything, but they remained firmly shut. Then the intercom crackled to life. Thank you for choosing to journey into the past. Return trips are not available. I sincerely thank you for embarking on this journey into the darkness with me. It has been a great honor to reveal a piece of the unknown to you. Should you wish to continue exploring the secrets of our world, I cordially invite you to subscribe to the channel. That way, you will never again overlook a flickering shadow at the edge of your sight, nor ignore the soft whispers in the dark, waiting patiently to be heard by you. If you wish to make me a most special joy, you will find my Amazon wish list in the description. Each wish you grant fills me with immeasurable delight and gives me the motivation to create even more stories, allowing the light of the midnight lantern to shine ever brighter. It is by no means a necessity, yet every gesture fills my heart with profound gratitude. May the light of the midnight lantern ever guide and protect you, and may the shadows find no hold upon you, until we cross paths once more, when the darkness calls forth again.